All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're diving deep into Roman military history, specifically Mark Antony.
Ooh, Antony.
And this one's for all you military history buffs out there. We're not just talking about the love story with Cleopatra.
Right, there's so much more to him.
This is about Antony the general,
Yeah.
the politician, the guy who almost became emperor.
A fascinating figure, truly.
We'll unpack the major conflicts he was involved in, break down his wins and losses.
And really try to understand how those battles shaped European history as we know it.
It's like a tactical analysis of Antony's career.
I like that. A tactical analysis. Where did he shine? Where did he stumble? And how did it all impact an entire empire?
Exactly.
You know, when I think of Mark Antony, what's always struck me is that contrast between his battlefield brilliance and some of his, well, disastrous strategic decisions.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. The guy was a master tactician. He could inspire his troops like no other, lead them to victory. But he often seemed to miss the bigger picture. The long-term planning, the logistics, you know, those crucial elements of a successful campaign.
Interesting. Do you have an example?
His Parthian campaign is a perfect case study.
Ah, yes. The Parthian campaign. Let's talk about that. 36 BC, if I'm not mistaken. Antony is at the height of his power, decides to take on the Parthian Empire.
Not an easy opponent.
No, not at all. Even for Rome, the Parthians were a force to be reckoned with.
And he assembles this massive army, over 100,000 strong, you'd think.
Unstoppable.
Right, what could possibly go wrong?
But something did.
Big time. It's a classic case of, well, having a large army is great, but managing it effectively, especially in hostile territory.
Different story.
Completely. And that's where Antony, despite being such a gifted tactician, made some critical errors.
Like what? What did he do?
Well, for starters, he divided his forces, which stretched his supply lines incredibly thin,
Okay.
and he underestimated the Parthians.
Underestimated how?
Their ability to fight a war of attrition. He was trying to fight a Roman-style war on Parthian ground.
Yeah.
It backfired. Badly.
So it wasn't just one big mistake.
No.
It was a series of decisions.
Exactly. A
Yeah.
chain reaction that led to a massive strategic failure.
But even in defeat, Antony showed his tactical skills.
Oh, absolutely. The sources describe a truly remarkable retreat. He saved his legions from total annihilation, adapted to the changing situation, reacted quickly to the Parthian tactic.
Impressive.
Very. He managed to inflict heavy losses on the enemy even while retreating. It shows his ability to think on his feet, make tough choices under pressure, essential skills for any military leader.
So even in defeat, he salvaged something, proved himself as a battlefield commander.
Definitely.
But then, this is what I don't get. Why, after such a setback, did he choose to celebrate his eventual victory over a combined Armenian-Parthian force in Alexandria? Why not go back to Rome for a proper Roman triumph?
Ah, yes. That's where Cleopatra comes in.
Cool.
Adds a whole other layer to this story. Antony's decision to have his triumph in Alexandria instead of Rome. That was a calculated risk. And you could argue a miscalculation.
How so?
It showed he was prioritizing his personal life over Roman politics,
I see.
which alienated some people back in Rome, and it fueled this perception that he was getting too close to a foreign power, drifting away from Roman affairs.
A classic case of a general letting his personal life influence his decisions.
It would seem so.
And this wasn't the only time he did this. What about his decision to give Cleopatra and their children all those titles and territories? I mean, that must have raised some eyebrows in Rome.
Oh, yeah. That was a direct challenge to his rival, Octavian. Don't forget, this is a time when political power was a zero-sum game. Any sign of weakness could be used against you. And by elevating Cleopatra and their kids like that...
He was creating a rival power base.
Exactly. A potential threat to the stability of Rome itself. Bold move. But it ultimately backfired.
So all this was happening in Egypt, but what was Octavian doing back in Rome? Was he just sitting back waiting for Antony to mess up? Or was he making his own moves?
Octavian was not one to sit idly by. He was always looking for an opportunity. And one of his most cunning moves was how he dealt with Lepidus.
Lepidus,
Yeah.
the third guy in the second triumvirate.
The very same, often forgotten, poor Lepidus.
What happened to him?
Well, he saw Antony weakening and tried to take advantage, thought he could expand his own power base, but he underestimated Octavian.
Yeah.
Octavian was ruthless and politically brilliant. He'd already secured the loyalty of Lepidus's legions.
So when Lepidus made his move,
His troops just abandoned him, left him powerless. It was a bloodless coup, a masterclass in political maneuvering.
wow. Talk about a strategic takedown.
Indeed.
So with Lepidus out of the picture, Octavian controlled the entire western half of the Roman world, setting the stage for the final showdown with Antony.
Precisely.
And this wasn't just about land, was it? This was about...
Oh, this was so much more than territory. This was a war of propaganda, a battle for the hearts and minds of the Roman people. Both Antony and Octavian knew that to win ultimate power, they needed more than just military might. They needed the support of the masses.
A battle of ideas. Fascinating.
Absolutely, and we'll dive deeper into that when we come back. Welcome back. Last time we were talking about this war of propaganda between Antony and Octavian.
Yeah, this battle for the hearts and minds of the Roman people. How did that actually play out?
Well, Octavian had some pretty savvy advisors.
Right.
And they framed the conflict as this clash between Roman values and foreign influence. They painted Antony as well.
As what?
A puppet of Cleopatra, a man blinded by love and ambition, willing to sacrifice Rome for his own gain.
Ooh, that's a powerful message, especially for a society that was always wary of foreign interference. What did Antony do? How did he counter that?
He tried to portray Octavian as this power-hungry usurper.
Okay.
Someone who'd manipulated his way into Caesar's inner circle and was now trying to seize control of Rome for himself.
Did that work?
Not really.
Why not?
Well, for one, Antony himself had been the one to publicly read Caesar's will, which named Octavian as his heir.
Right, so he kind of shot himself in the foot there.
You could say that. Plus, focusing on Cleopatra as the enemy was just way more effective.
Yeah, I could see that.
It put Antony in a position where he had to defend her, which made him look weak and subservient.
So Octavian was playing a much more sophisticated game, huh? Exploiting Antony's weaknesses, turning public opinion against him.
Definitely.
And all this leads up to the big showdown, the Battle of Actium. This was it, right? The battle that would decide the fate of Rome.
Absolutely. It doesn't get much bigger than this.
Can you set the scene for us? What was at stake?
Imagine you're on the deck of a Roman warship.
Okay.
The sun glinting off the Mediterranean, the salty spray in your face.
I can almost feel it.
And you know that everything hinges on the outcome of this battle. For Antony, this was his chance to prove his loyalty to Rome, to secure his legacy, to protect the woman he loved and their children. But for Octavian...
Yeah, what about Octavian?
This was about revenge.
Revenge for?
Avenging Caesar, fulfilling his destiny, and establishing a new era of peace and prosperity under his rule.
Wow. The stakes could not have been higher. So tell me about the battle. How did it go down?
Actium was an epic clash of titans, a naval engagement on a scale rarely seen in ancient warfare.
Give us the numbers. How many ships are we talking about?
Antony commanded a fleet of over 500 ships, many of them massive, heavily armed vessels.
Whoa.
Octavian's fleet, led by his brilliant Admiral Agrippa, was smaller, about 400 ships.
Right.
But they were faster, more maneuverable.
So classic David and Goliath situation, huh?
In a way, yeah. The early stages of the battle were fierce, chaotic. Both sides fought with incredible courage. But then...
What happened? Something changed the tide.
Cleopatra, who was commanding part of Antony's fleet, suddenly ordered her ships to retreat.
Wait, she just retreated in the middle of the battle?
Yep.
Why?
To this day, no one knows for sure. Some historians think she panicked, wanted to protect her own power and wealth. Others speculate that she might have had a secret deal with Octavian.
A betrayal?
Could be. Whatever the reason, her retreat had a devastating impact on Antony's fleet.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly. And Antony's reaction, that was even more shocking.
Did he try to rally his troops?
No, he did something completely unexpected. He abandoned his fleet and followed Cleopatra.
What?
He left his men to fight a losing battle.
I can't believe it. Talk about abandoning your troops in their hour of need.
Yeah, not exactly a shining moment in leadership. It was a catastrophic blunder. It handed victory to Octavian. It showed that Antony, for all his brilliance on the battlefield, was prone to rash decisions. He let his emotions cloud his judgment.
And this ultimately led to his downfall.
It sealed his fate.
So Actium was more than just a battle.
Much more.
It was the end of an era.
The symbolic death of the Roman Republic. The dawn of a new age of imperial rule.
Wow. But the story doesn't end there, does it? What happened to Antony and Cleopatra after this devastating defeat?
Their story, like the republic they fought over, was heading towards a tragic end, but we'll save that for next time.
All right, we're back for the final chapter of our Mark Antony deep dive. We've seen his rise to power, his triumphs on the battlefield, and then those critical strategic mistakes that ultimately led to his downfall. Actium. That was a turning point. not just for Antony and Cleopatra, but for Rome itself.
It really was a symbolic end of one era and the dawn of a new one. And with Antony defeated, well, the path was clear for Octavian to reshape Rome according to his vision.
So as Antony and Cleopatra are trying to regroup in Egypt, Octavian is consolidating his power, setting the stage for the Roman Empire.
Exactly. And for Antony and Cleopatra, those final days, well, the sources paint a pretty bleak picture. Despair, desperation, their armies scattered, allies abandoning them, and Octavian's forces were relentless. For someone like you, a military history enthusiast, it's important to remember this wasn't just about brute force anymore.
Right, this was a different kind of conflict.
Absolutely. Politics and public image were just as important as tactics on the battlefield.
So even with all his military skills, Antony was outmaneuvered in this new arena, a war of words and images.
He was. So in 30 BC, Octavian's forces invade Egypt, and they crush any remaining resistance. Antony, trapped in Alexandria, he hears that Cleopatra is dead, and he can't face defeat, capture.
So he takes his own life.
He does. Falls on his sword. A dramatic end for a man who'd lived such a dramatic life.
It's almost Shakespearean, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about Cleopatra, though? What happened to her?
Her story ends in mystery and intrigue. Plutarch tells us she arranged this elaborate suicide, allowing herself to be bitten by an asp, a venomous snake.
The queen choosing death over surrender. It's an image that's captured imaginations for centuries.
It has. But there are other interpretations, of course.
Oh.
Some historians question the whole asp thing.
Really?
They think Octavian might have had her poisoned, get rid of a potential figurehead for rebellion and secure control of Egypt's wealth.
It's a cold, calculated move.
Yeah.
But it does fit with Octavian's MO.
It does, doesn't it? So whether it was her own hand or Octavian's doing, Cleopatra's death marked the end of an era. The Ptolemaic dynasty falls, Egypt becomes part of this expanding Roman Empire, and Octavian is standing alone at the top. But did he just declare himself emperor? Start ruling with an iron fist?
He was smarter than that, right?
Much smarter. Octavian understood that real power wasn't just about military force. It was about controlling the narrative, shaping public perception. He was a master of political theater. He gave up his emergency powers, returned authority to the Senate.
But behind the scenes.
He was pulling the strings, consolidating his control, playing the long game.
And it worked?
Oh, it worked brilliantly.
Yeah.
The Senate, they were relieved, thought he was going to step back from absolute power, so they showered him with honors, gave him the title Augustus.
Augustus, a name that signifies peace, prosperity, the Pax Romana. But it all came at a cost, didn't it?
Yeah.
What happened to the ideals of the Republic? The idea of shared power, citizen participation?
As Augustus solidified his power, those old institutions, they were gradually hollowed out. They became tools of his authority. He kept the appearance of a republic, but the reality was he controlled the army, the treasury, the Senate. He was, for all intents and purposes, the first Roman emperor.
And that transition from republic to empire, that had a massive impact, not just on Rome, but on all of Western civilization.
Absolutely. It's a pivotal moment in history.
So thinking about Mark Antony, his story is so intertwined with the fall of the Republic, the rise of the empire, ambition, love, betrayal, and ultimately the rise of a new kind of power. For you, as someone who studies military history, what are the big takeaways here?
Well, I think there are several. First, Antony's story, it highlights how important strategic thinking is, not just on the battlefield, but in politics and shaping public opinion. He was a brilliant tactician, but he missed the bigger picture, let his emotions get the best of him.
Yeah.
And then Octavian's rise, it reminds us that power is often gained through subtle manipulation, control of institutions, of the narrative itself, rather than brute force.
Yeah.
And finally, that shift from republic to empire, it shows us that even the most established systems of government can change, shaped by individual ambitions and the forces of history.
Lessons that are still relevant today, when the nature of power is constantly evolving. Any final thoughts for our listeners as we wrap up our deep dive into the life and times of Mark Antony?
I'd say this. Every battle, every conflict, it has ripple effects that reach far beyond the people directly involved. The choices made by people like Antony and Octavian, they shaped the course of history. They influenced the political landscape, the social and cultural fabric of Europe, and the world beyond. Studying these events, it helps us understand not just the past, but the forces that are still shaping our world today.
Well said. And on that note, we conclude our exploration of Mark Antony, a man whose triumphs and tragedies give us a glimpse into a truly pivotal moment in history. Thanks for joining us.